What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. GoldenEra here. Today we have another trigger tutorial. So I'm gonna be making this into a series where I explain a lot of the triggers in the game so you can understand how to use them. I'm also be expecting more videos like this in the future. Now today we're going to be talking about spawn loops. And if you don't know what a spawn loop is, it's basically using the spawn trigger to make another set of triggers loop over and over again infinitely. Or unless you make it stop. Now, if you don't know what a spawn trigger is, or you don't know how to use it, we'll also be going over that right after I finish this intro. If you do know how to use the spawn trigger, now you look at the very bottom of the video on the little red bar thingy. I don't know what it's called. You'll see the video is split into sections. You can skip to the part where I talk about the spawn loop. But if you don't know how to use the spawn trigger, let's go ahead and learn that now. Okay, we're in the GoldenEra level editor now. Let's start with some basic trigger movements so then I can explain this. You have a block, you give it a group, and then you ask it to move up. Everyone knows how to do that. If you play the game long enough, you create a little bit. You know the very basics of this movement. It's all I've done here is given an ease, and you don't have to worry about this. Just every 10 blocks is one block. So every 10 here is one block. Let's move 5 blocks up. And as you can see, that happens as soon as I pass this line right here. So whether I want it to or not, it's not like if I jump, it'll stop. No, it's going to happen whether I want it to or not. Now, maybe you haven't tried this before because you don't do this kind of advanced trigger work. But if you give a trigger a group, you can do more things with this trigger. And that's kind of what one of those things you can do is use the spawn trigger on that trigger. So let me explain how to use the spawn trigger now. Once you've given your trigger a group, if you go to edit object and you click spawn triggered, don't know about multi-trigger, we'll go into that later. If you click spawn triggered, then you can see here it's not going to work. Right, the block isn't moving up, but I'm passing that line. And like you can also see that the little line thing, it goes away. That's because this trigger no longer is triggered at that line. It's triggered whenever it's spawned. So this trigger is in group 2. If we use the spawn trigger right here, this block is going to move up when we pass the spawn trigger. Now, how to use the spawn trigger? When you go into the editor thing, the edit object, you're going to see that there's a group ID, there's a delay, and then there's all this stuff that we're not going to worry about for now. The group ID is the group of the trigger you want it to spawn, not the object. So our object is in group 1, as you can see here, but our trigger is in group 2. So you want to trigger group 2, not the group of the object. So first it's going to be group 2. And as you can see, as we pass this line, the block moves up. If we were to delete this, the block doesn't move up. Now, you notice this little delay slider here. You might have figured this out by now, but if you haven't, that's fine too. This is basically the delay of time you want after you pass this line that the trigger will activate. So basically, if I put it for 1 second, after 1 second after I pass this line right here, the trigger will activate. Now if I can not die, as you can see, it doesn't activate immediately, but a second after I pass the line, it does activate. So that is how you use a spawn trigger. Okay, so now I'm going to go into spawn loops. Let's take another block, a fresh block, and give it a group. For example, group 1. Now let's give it a little bit of a movement in a triangle. For example, let's put this at 0.3. Group 1. So we'll make this move up a block. And after that, we'll make it move to the right 1 block. and then it'll make it move diagonally back to its starting position. Oops. This way, this way, this way, nicely. It makes a sort of triangle. Now, not like this though.
Obviously these triggers are not spaced out properly, so it's not going to work. But as you can see, if we turn on no clip and turn off follow player.
If you just look at this block, you're going to see it's going to move in a sort of triangular shape. Now, what if we wanted this block to keep moving in that triangular shape forever, for whatever reason? That's where spawn loops come in. So first take your set of triggers, and for organizational purposes, you can put them closer together. This won't matter later on. And now, under each of these smooth triggers, put a spawn trigger. Okay. Now, give each row a new group. 2, 3, and group 4. Now, if you watch the spawn trigger tutorial part of this video, you'll know that we can put triggers in groups and then they can be activated by another trigger. What I did not explain was that you can spawn a spawn trigger. What? If that doesn't make sense to you, it'll make sense in a second. Basically, this trigger and the spawn trigger under it are both in group 2. The way a spawn loop will work is that we'll spawn this trigger first. Okay? This spawn trigger. So we'll spawn group 2. That's this thing. So the block will move up 1 block. But this spawn trigger will spawn group 3, and this is in group 3. Now, by spawning group 3, we're making the block move to the right, but we're also spawning this spawn trigger. Now, this spawn trigger will spawn group 4. So basically, each spawn trigger is spawning the next spawn trigger. Now, this final spawn trigger isn't going to stop the loop. This final spawn trigger is going to start this trigger again, which is going to make the cycle go on forever. Now, how does this work? Well, we're going to have this is in group 2. We want this one to spawn the group ahead of us. So this spawn trigger is in group 3. Let's double check to make sure they're both in group 3. Yep. This is going to spawn group 3. And this is going to spawn the group ahead of it. So this is in group 4, correct? Yep. This is going to spawn group 4. And then this is not going to spawn group 5. This is going to go back to the beginning and spawn whatever group these are in, which is group 2. If that doesn't make sense, then it'll make sense in a second. As you can see, nothing really happened. Do you know why? That's because we've made all the trigger work almost, but none of these are actually being triggered by the spawn triggers. So, select them all, go to Edit Object, and hit Spawn Triggered, and now hit Multi-Triggered. If you go into here to explain why, this explains why how the spawn trigger works. And now you're going to see that nothing at all will happen. Why is that? If you think about it, we have the loop here, okay? This trigger will spawn this trigger, which will spawn this trigger, which will spawn this trigger. But the loop has to start, correct? And the where it starts is this trigger will be spawned. That's how it starts, okay? The block will move up. But what's spawning this group right here? It's this group, correct? But this group is still waiting to be spawned. What spawns this group? Well, the one before it. And this is spawned by this. So we're in a cycle of infinite looping, right? But that never happens if we cannot start the loop. Now the way we do that is you just go ahead and copy and paste this, and wherever you want the loop to start, we'll start our loop right here. Turn off spawn trigger. This is the group that spawns this group, correct? So, if we take off the spawn triggered aspect of this, so this is triggered by a spawn trigger. This triggers whenever you pass the line. As you can see, there is that line there. This will start that loop. Now, if you want, for safety measure, you can take it out of a group so it's its own trigger, right? And now we'll have an infinite loop. Oh wait, I think there's one more issue. We're going to put this at a, I think, 0.3 delay. Yep. Why did I put it at a 0.3 delay? That's just because these move in 0.3 seconds. So we don't want this one to spawn this one before this one has even basically started, right? So that's why you just put it at the delay. Hope that made sense. I'm going to go ahead and explain how to do this in more advanced scenarios.
So we have all this, right? Now what we can do is we can link all this. And I'll explain link controls in another video. That's quite useful, actually. We can figure it out.
Okay. Suppose you have an end screen, okay? And this is when the trigger is used a lot by people who don't make Geometry Dash minigames or cool movement effects and stuff like that. Suppose you have an end screen for a level. Okay, let's get a decent font just so it feels more realistic. I'm not getting a really fancy one because that one's overused. Let's just say end screen. Okay. Now suppose on this end screen you want this GG thingy, I don't know. You want this GG sign, which you can turn off glow for, to move back and forth. So you want to kind of like swing back and forth all the time. But if you don't know, the level ends after the last object you place, including triggers. So you can't just spam the same set of triggers over and over again, because the end screen won't be the end screen then. It'll just be blank. But if you've seen, there are creators who've been able to pull off the moving end screen, or like some kind of animation at the end of the level that keeps going. But you're at the end of the level, you finished the level. They use spawn loops for that. So first, let's give this a group. For example, we'll start with group 5 today. And let's just make it move back and forth. So group 5. We can give it an easing just so that it's kind of nice. And we'll make it move. We can move up and down actually. Make it move 15, so 1.5 blocks. And then we can make it move down those 15 blocks again. And now one way you could do this is to just copy and paste these triggers and then just keep going, right? And just keep copying and pasting them until the end. And you'll just keep copying them and pasting them over and over again. But as we've learned, this won't be the end of the level then. So it's going to move up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down, right? So how do we make it so that this is the actual end of the level? Well, we use a spawn loop. So we're going to take all these other useless triggers out. And we're going to put 2 spawn triggers under these. Okay.
We're going to give this a group 6, and this a group 7. This is in group 6, it'll spawn group 7 after a 0.4 delay, because that's the movement time. And group 7 will go back to the beginning and spawn group 6 with another 0.4 delay time, because that's the movement time. We're going to make all of these spawn triggered and multi-triggered. That's going to start. Simply pass the GG sign. And you might put this in a more adequate spot, I would hope. But I'm just going to do this so that we can see that it actually starts when we want it to, not whenever.
And now as you'll see, we have our little GG loop. You saw that it took a while to start. That's because we have a delay on it. Whoops. There we go. Now, obviously, with a real end screen and a hopefully better end screen, I'm not gonna lie, hopefully better end screen, you'll have something more interesting going on here. But that's the way you can use it. That's one way you can use it. There are many more ways you can use spawn loops, but they're especially useful if you're making mini games or just some kind of cool effect, like kind of minigame effect, or maybe even a boss fight, right? You want the attacks to repeat over and over again until you stop it. The last part I want to talk about in spawn loops is how to stop a spawn loop. So as you can see, it's not going to stop. Now this might get annoying after a while, especially if you need something to stop. You know, you need it to stop moving or stop doing whatever it's doing, but you don't know how to do that. Well, that's easily done by a spawn trigger. No, I'm kidding. We don't need any more spawn triggers to stop it. The action to stop it is you just use the stop trigger. So I want it to stop right here, right? You wouldn't use this for an end screen because then the end level will be over there, but for something else, right? For maybe our block moving thing, right? This will stop the movement. Now, I would just stop any one of these, really. Because once this has started, this is no more part of the loop. This is just like the Kickstarter. This is the loop. So stopping this won't really do anything. Stop one of these groups, so we'll stop group 6, and that should stop the loop. You want to make sure you do stop it where you want to stop it. So I'm going to stop group 6 because group 6 makes it move back up. I want it to stop in its original spot. And this group 7 is what makes it move back to its original spot. So as you're going to see, let's just make sure I did all this right. Yeah, I did. Okay. It's going to keep moving, and then once we pass the stop trigger that's over there somewhere, it'll stop. Now let's just prove that by zooming out a little bit, just so we can see everything. Boom. If you enjoyed the video, a like would be very much appreciated. A comment would be also appreciated. If you like my other content, it'd be awesome if you could subscribe. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. Have a great day.